Earth, a Love Story. Written and read by Robin Lassiter. Chapter 7. Where you stumble, there lies your treasure. Joseph Campbell. In response to my prayer comes a man. He's an artist, broke but talented. Together we leave the yurt behind, along with all of my friends and family and the circle and the moon. He appears so soon after my prayer that I'm certain this is what it was all for. The dreams and spheres and all of it, conspiring to get me to a place where I meet a guy and follow him away, and now my life finally happens. Easy, I think. No shattering required after all. We moved into a 114-year-old adobe house deep in New Mexico that was haunted by the ghosts of the people who had abandoned it before we arrived, and almost immediately, by our own demons. As high as I'd been in the yurt, that's how low I fell. Lower, maybe. Low enough to learn why women don't leave. I'd always held a judgment of that. Why not just leave? Then I lived through it and I understood. It was a hard wisdom and it almost killed me. Amazingly, I'm still tempted to downplay it. It is certainly worse for many others. I had means and could have left whenever I wanted. He didn't really ever beat me. There was some kicking and pushing, and there were terrifying threats of greater violence, but most of it was emotional and psychological abuse. I still, even today, can feel myself wanting to qualify it as not that bad. It was, though. It was bad. I was fully in the underworld. I'd lost the path. It all happened so fast. I was approaching the utter darkness, tasked with facing the things I didn't think I could survive facing. I stumbled through the dark forest with no idea how to find my way through. This all started out feeling like a great adventure in a gorgeous old abandoned adobe house south of Albuquerque. Before long, I was once again curled into a tight little ball, this time not against the cold, but because if my foot strayed too near to him as I slept, I'd get a solid kick. There was contempt and disgust and yelling in my face and my bruised wrist in his iron grip and his hand open and pulled back, threatening me to say one more word while I cringed away and sobbed. I started drinking again and smoking heavily almost immediately. There were empty bottles of wine, empty cans of beer, and cigarette butts overflowing the ashtrays. There was shame and stink and exhaustion and shock. We got drunk and fought, and the next morning when our hangovers were destroying us, we had sex to feel the endorphins and get through the day. Really, we did it that consciously. There was no love or connection. Just please, God, I need to feel better, so you get me off and I'll get you off, and then maybe we can stagger to the coffee pot. Joke's on him, though. I always faked it because he could never get me off. But, oh, wait, joke's on me because he felt better and I still felt like hell. All of my pleasure and energy poured into his body, and mine is shot and shaky and heaving. I dreamed I was Frida Kahlo. My leg had been amputated and replaced with intricate metal scroll work and golden clock gears for joints. Diego was teasing me, being cruel, lifting my skirt with a cane to reveal this false leg, exposing me, shaming me. I hated him for doing that. I hated him because I actually, secretly, loved my delicate metal filigree and lattice leg, all silver and gold and black and sparkling. I yelled at him, cursing him, throwing handfuls of silverware to clatter onto the brick floors. Diego laughed and calmed me down, feeding me pomegranate jewels and orange slices while he whispered sweetness and stroked me, and I set my mouth and let my tears burn unshed and looked out the window towards my freedom. This is when my third gift, my secrets, my bent towards addiction, really settled in. The world had always been hard and confusing, but now it was unbearable, and I was to blame. I had been in paradise, in my yurt, my second Eden. Who gets two in one life, I mean, really? And I'd lost it. I'd given it up for this ugliness and sickness and waste. I started drinking in earnest. It was better when I could pass out, better than being awake for any of this. It was better drunk. It was much easier to pretend that I wasn't being drained, sucked dry and hollow when I was halfway through my second bottle. It felt so good to smoke my anger and self-pity. It was such a relief to go to the back porch and fret and stew and cry and rage and smoke and smoke. Who fucking cared anyway? I isolated from my friends and family, ashamed of what I was going through, ashamed at how I'd come from such a heightened, joyful, rarefied experience living in the yurt to arrive here, ashamed because I knew that I was allowing all of this. I was funding it, too. I told myself a story that I was supporting him while he got his art career going, and someday he'd do the same for me. I was embarrassed by my ugly, impotent anger, embarrassed that I'd lost everything again, only this time I couldn't rally. I was a broken person. I had so much potential for love and beauty in my life, and instead I was here, sleeping alone while he stayed up and watched porn, making him food while he told me I was fat, pretending I was okay with him fucking off while I worked all day, and hating myself while I begged him to notice me. He was angry and cruel, and all of the blame was on me because why couldn't I just be happy? What the hell was wrong with me? I drank and smoked myself so sick, my flesh saturated and toxic, poisoned. I aged 5 years and 6 months. I hadn't yet learned about attachment styles or codependency or any of that fun stuff, but was living the pain of it day in and day out. I was purely in survival mode, hanging on by my fingernails. I called the abandoned house we'd moved into the adobe abode. It must have been grand once. It had huge, 100-year-old, beautiful, deep brown Vegas, varnished slick with tobacco. It had brick floors that pitched and rolled and stubbed your toes in the middle of the night. It had patinated green tin ceilings in the wide hallway with its deep, built-in arched bookshelves and dark romance. There weren't enough windows. The walls were 18 inches thick. It wasn't truly adobe, but built from blocks cut and collected from the mud flats alongside the Rio Grande before it had been dammed, like me, and so still flooded and reseeded with the spring melt and summer drought. It was hard to see what the river had been before it was split and fragmented and channeled here and there to water big flat fields of hay. Hard to see why the Navajo and Pueblo peoples called it Big River, and hard to feel why in the 1500s the Spanish called it El Rio Bravo del Norte, the fierce, furious, agitated river of the north. If I tried hard, I could imagine it at some time sweeping back and forth along the valley floor over the centuries, central to so many people's lives and deaths, and a long witness to long cycles of unbroken time. Now it felt like a dumping ground for all of the people's grief and pain and secrets. When we arrived, there was a big roll-off dumpster in the yard, the previous owner's personal papers, a commendation from the city of San Francisco, a tattered driver's license, scraps of old bills were scattered around, fluttering on bits of dried sagebrush and the sparse brown grass. There were journals describing a failing marriage that started out happy and then turned anguish as the husband contemplated how to escape caretaking his disabled wife. There was a noose hanging from a tree near the shed that we'd assumed was a joke, but turns out wasn't. There was a sickness soaked into that house that was hard to pin down, but emanated from the adobe walls like cat piss. The day before we moved in, lightning struck the big cottonwood in the front yard, and a huge limb came down, crushing a section of fence and blocking the entrance. I should have seen the signs. My dreams turned dark and tortured. There were loud knocks in the bedroom in the middle of the night, making us and the dogs jump up, ready to fight or run. I couldn't go through the hallway with its beautiful tin ceiling and big recessed bookshelves without feeling the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. Ghosts roamed that house and barely bothered to hide themselves. They gave me nightmares. They left dead birds on the doorstep and sent shiny black widows into every corner, their messy webs collecting dust. I took the noose down and threw it into the weeds by the barn. A couple days later, it was back again, swinging gently in a breeze. There was a garden, but the flea beetles turned our spinach and cabbage leaves into lace, and the sun baked the rest to dust. We got chickens, and they became infested with mites. Another tree on the property, 30 feet tall, mature, full of life and rustling leaves when we'd arrived, died suddenly, dropped all of its leaves in just a week, and then fell into the barn. Do you remember those blood moons that everyone was talking about in 2014? 4 consecutive total lunar eclipses starting in April, and there was all of this doom and prophecy around them. That was going on during this time, and I swear to God, if the spheres bathed the land and my surroundings in gentle green and lilac and blue light, this place was bathed in the shadow of those blood moons. It was an upside-down world, a dark reflection washed in a dim, rusty light that made me queasy. I got sicker and folded into myself, becoming smaller and more dense and more frightened. When I allowed friends or family to come visit, I rallied and put on a happy face, and they would look at me sideways or sometimes come right out and ask me what I was doing there. Why didn't I leave? And I would look back with wide, innocent eyes and ask them whatever could they possibly mean. When they left, I would hold my stomach and cry silently into my pillow. There was a gun in the dresser drawer, and he mentioned it sometimes, mentioned his thoughts of suicide, and I started to think about it too. I could feel it there, in the bottom drawer that always closed crooked, pulsing there, half hidden under half-folded clothes, dark and gleaming and seductive. I woke up with scratches on my body. I couldn't stop having nightmares. Nightmares where we both killed ourselves, or he killed me, or I killed him and then me. I assumed the ghost who haunted us was the man whose driver's license and journals and papers we'd found strewn around the big yard. I assumed it in a casual way, not really believing in ghosts necessarily, but finding it hard to explain away the knocking, the nightmares, the scratches, and the darkening circles under my eyes. One day I asked the neighbor about the history of the property and what was the actual deal with the fucking noose, anyway. He adjusted his ball cap, draped his arms onto a fence post, and leaned his chin on his stacked hands. He squinted past me and looked at the house. They moved here from California. It was her dream property. She called it a ranch. We both chuckled at city people thinking a dusty 1-acre piece of desert was a ranch. She did love this place, though. She was a writer, I think. He was some big deal in San Francisco. They got married and moved here, and for a few months they seemed really happy. Then, all of a sudden, she got sick. Real sick. She went blind. She had to be in a wheelchair. Diabetes, I think. Anyway, she had a stroke. She couldn't walk, couldn't wipe herself. He took care of her for 6 years. 6 fucking years. It was rough, man. He got sick too. Started drinking a lot. She finally died. He scattered her ashes over every inch of that property. My arms erupted in painful goose flesh. So he wasn't the ghost. She was. I looked at my neighbor. "Oh yeah," he said, "the noose." After she died, he'd sit out there almost every night and drink and smoke and look at that noose. He wanted to kill himself. He would just sit there and look at it, walk over and adjust it, go sit back down against the house, drink some more. I couldn't take it, man. It was awful to watch. I went over and visited a few times, and that house was full of so much shit. Boxes, papers, furniture, books, trash. There were pathways through all of it, and if you sat down on the couch, mice would run across your hands, I shit you not. He didn't have any family, nowhere to go, but said if he could just get back to California, he'd be okay. I don't have much, but I scraped up a couple $100 and bought him a bus ticket. One morning he was just gone. He left. He left everything and got on a bus. I never heard anything from him after that. After that little talk, I did what anyone in my position would do. I Googled how the fuck to get rid of a ghost. The first article that came up said that ghosts are just people, stuck between the worlds. They aren't evil or horrible or dark, just stuck and confused. Apparently they just need a nudge, it said. Someone to point out the light and send them on their way. Okay, I could buy that. The very next night, there was a loud rapping on the windowsill next to the bed. We gasped up out of sleep, and he laid back down after we got the dog settled, and I pushed myself back up against the wall and stayed sitting up in bed. "Go away," I whispered. "Go into the light. Go home." I watched as my arm raised and my finger pointed up into the corner of the bedroom. "There. See the light? Go home. I won't do anything bad to your place. Go home." I stayed up the rest of the night and prayed for help. I prayed to God for an end to her suffering and mine and everyone's. I prayed for a way out. I prayed and prayed and prayed and grieved and cried. And then in the early morning hours, when light began to come back to the world, I hoped a little. Not long after, I dreamed a friend of mine was pregnant, but didn't want to bother going through labor. She had a trip planned and asked if I would have the baby for her, and she'd be back in a couple of weeks. She gave him to me, unborn, in an amniotic sac, blue and white and veined and pulsing with life. I set it on the bathroom counter and took a huge black pair of glinting scissors and cut open the sac. The fluid gushed out and revealed a perfectly formed baby boy. He never cried, showed no emotion, just watched me silently while I cleaned him up, swaddled and warm. Across the world, I could see the mother pass the placenta, and then I cut the cord. I looked down and he'd morphed into a wolf pup. I called his mother to come and get him, but she said she couldn't take him, and could I please be his wet nurse until she got back. He was awkward to hold. It was awkward to find the right angle to get him to latch onto my breast, but eventually he began nursing. The second time I nursed him, I walked into the woods to find a magic place to feed him. He was getting heavy, unwieldy, dangerous. The third time I nursed him, I meditated under a big tree in the forest and looked down to see that he'd become this man. Black hair, black framed glasses, cruel face looking at me. After the night of the praying, there wasn't any knocking. I stopped getting unexplainable scratches, and clearly my nightmares were now about my own life. The darkness, though, did not leave us or the house. We were infected with it. Some rancid, dire plot had been put into motion, and we were well into this. I read Rumi. There is both the amber and the lodestone. Whether thou art iron or straw, thou wilt come to the hook. I shivered. I knew exactly what that meant. I could feel it building, gathering in the corners with the spider webs, getting caught in my hair. I couldn't wipe it away no matter how hard I tried. One day we fought. I'm barefoot in the dim living room, cold, that dark hallway behind me. My arms tight crossed over my chest, my back curved, my shoulder blades folded around me like wings, making a hollow place for my heart to hide. So contracted, so tense. He's on the couch playing on his phone. We're fighting the same fight again, grinding it into each other, drawing blood. I want him to get a job. He wants me to lose weight. I'm the same person, you know, the same person you used to love. I've only put on 15 pounds. I'm still me. I halfway cock a hip. I am simpering, and I hate myself. I'm still sexy. Want to bet? He laughs, cruel. I flush and yell at him to get a fucking job. He's taller than me, 6'2", thin with black hair, and even though he carries a little pot belly that disgusts him, he's naturally muscled and much stronger than I am. He glares at me and jumps off the couch, running past me towards the bedroom, towards the dresser, towards the bottom drawer. I know exactly what he's going for. I chase him and grab his arm and plant my feet and summon all of my strength and pull with all of my weight against him and beg him not to. And he looks at me, blazing, and thinks about it. He decides, spits his hatred on me, snaps his arm out of my grasp and stomps past me back into the living room. I lean against the wall, shuddering and sobbing in total silence so I won't make it worse. Finally, I tiptoe to the bottom dresser drawer and pull the handgun out from under his clothes. My hands shake wildly. I grew up with a Daisy BB gun and a sweet little .22 rifle we shot cans with behind the house, but I don't know anything about handguns. I slip through the shadowed hallway and out the back door, around the side of the house, through the tangle of weeds between the fence and the wall, through the gate, pinching the gun gingerly between my first finger and thumb, and walk back and forth in the dark, not knowing what to do, where to hide it, and finally I bury it deep in the garden. I pull mulch back over the freshly disturbed soil and slip back into the house and wipe the dirt off the soles of my feet and get into bed and curl into a tight ball. I spend the night terrified he will notice the gun is gone and find the spot where I've hidden it. In the morning, I tell him he needs to leave. He laughs at me, and in a panic I start packing his things. He sees I'm serious, and maybe that's why he gives in without a fight. Maybe he knows that it's really done this time. Maybe he's scared too. Maybe deep down he's embarrassed or ashamed. Certainly, he's as miserable as I am. I don't know why it's different this time, but he packs and drives away. I wait for him too, but he doesn't mention his missing gun, and when he is surely hours down the road, I call a friend who knows about such things. Please don't ask me any questions. Just tell me what I should do with it. I don't want anyone finding it. I don't want it around me. I dig the gun up from the garden and carefully remove the magazine as she'd told me to do. God, so many bullets in there. I double and triple check that there's no ammunition in the chamber, and then, hands trembling, I pull the trigger. I remove the slide and pull out the spring and take out the barrel. Now it's in pieces, and even though it is inert, I can still feel it. I feel the spell of it, the dark magic around it. It lies there in front of me, dismembered but alive, with a sick, dark, glimmering, magnetic desire. I gather the pieces into a cloth bag and drive to a canal road and park. It's hard to get to the actual river with the spiderweb of irrigation ditches that come off of it now. I walk down the dirt road next to a big, wide, deep canal and follow it until I make it to the river itself, and then keep walking. The hot wind pulls the last bit of moisture out of my body and chaps my lips and flings sand into my eyes and against my legs and whips the branches of the cottonwoods that line the road beside me. I feel sorry for them, the cottonwoods. The leaves hold on, somehow still green, but brittle and lashed and thrashed and beaten by the wind, and they bear it because what else can they do? I walk until I am far away from the road, far up the river, and then I throw in the magazine and the bullets and watch them sink fast, disappearing into the brown water that swirls and swallows. And in that moment I can feel the river's true nature, furious, fierce. And I'm sorry I'm here just to dump my secrets and sins. I feel into the river and let my energy follow the flow at its center, and I feel it running through the heart of New Mexico, down through the desert, searching for the ocean, but long before it gets there, it is exhausted and dried up, and together we are defeated. I am overcome with unbearable grief that I don't have the energy to feel, so it turns into a rolling ache in every joint. I make the long, hot journey back to my car and drive to another spot, miles away, and repeat the pilgrimage and throw in another piece. And one last time, another location, I throw in the rest. I don't know why I do that, because I'm afraid he will come back and find it. I'm afraid if I don't break it up, dismantle and scatter it, it will still be able to hurt me. Because he's gone, but I'm still here, alone now, haunting my own house. I'm exhausted, sunburned, windburned. I am a desiccated tumbleweed stumbling back to my car. I stop at the liquor store on my way home. This time I don't bounce back. I leap and the net does not appear. I'd worn out that trick and would really have to face my demons in order to free myself from this mess. I didn't stop drinking, didn't stop destroying my body. I had completely lost my compass, my operating system. I had no ability to heal myself, no way to pick myself up by my bootstraps, and no way to reach out for help. My family and friends hundreds of miles away still loved me, but I'd hidden all of this from them. I was too ashamed and broken to reach out for help. I was a hollow, hungry ghost. Every night, if I was conscious instead of passed out, I told myself that tomorrow I would quit. No more smoking, no more drinking, no more. And then with my first cup of coffee, my first cigarette, or maybe I could wait until my first break at work, but sooner or later I would give in. And then since it was another day gone, another failure, I'd decide to stop drinking tomorrow. I just needed a little to relax, to soothe my nerves and help me forget and be happy for a moment. But then again, a little didn't do much, and a lot was always just right, especially if I could at some point find some oblivion and be unconscious or deep asleep for as much of the night as possible. That time became the only relief from myself I had, and I was desperate for it. For the night, the blackness, the nothingness. For that tiny moment in the morning, right when I woke up when nothing hurt, when I didn't feel sick, when there were no problems, when I was floating in an unformed space where I wasn't a fucked up fuck-up at the start of a new day that I would surely, if history could be counted upon to offer an accurate glimpse into the future, fuck up. I read about addiction and how to stop and consumed story after story of people getting sober and clear and happy and staying that way. I read about AA and rational recovery and moderation, and oh, how I loved that one. Moderation. What a great idea. So I tried that for a while, and weirdly, even though I locked the booze in a cabinet and set out 3 cigarettes for the day, somehow by noon I'd have smoked half a pack and poured an extra glass or cup or 3, and oh well, I guess I'll try again tomorrow. I read about tobacco and the spirit of it. I tried to communicate with the persona of tobacco and find out what the lesson was, and found a harsh, exacting teacher. Tobacco is a sacred plant, and when I lived in the yurt and my friends would come to visit and we would meditate and sing and howl, someone would roll a little cigarette from loose tobacco and share it with me, and that felt wonderful and magical and alive and heightened. Now that I was sucking down as many American Spirit yellows as I could, abusing it and myself, there was no sweetness left there. She was still a teacher, but now she taught me by dragging and scraping and grinding my flesh, keeping me ever raw and dry-eyed and hollowed out with her harshness. She made my lungs raw and open and bloody and wrung my sorrow from them, but it never truly left. It stayed, the sorrow, and I was drowning in it. Wine and beer and sometimes whiskey and sometimes all of that together scoured my insides. It was a velvet poison that went down all warm and calming and soothing and loving and seductive, and then racked my body with pain and sickness. It freed me from my tired, winding mind, and in exchange I was its slave. All of my energy, my money, my life force, in exchange for a little window of time when I felt right, and for a few hours of blackness in an unconscious night. And honestly, it was worth it. Yes, wring me and scrape me and hollow me and saturate me and scour me and sicken me in exchange for a small moment of relief. I agree. I consent. Let's do this. Let's go. I'll drive. It all stopped working, though, as that kind of thing always does, and any small breeze of relief that offered a moment of rest or even the blessed nothingness came less and less often until eventually even that air was poisoned and stagnant and sour, and there was no freshness, no newness, no peace. There came a day when there was nothing left in my life other than the darkness and the pain and the confusion and the helplessness, and still I couldn't surrender. I couldn't let go. I couldn't bear to feel it and face it, so I just kept sliding into the shadows beneath the surface of myself. Finally, I slid under the gaze of another man, William. Men and I clearly hadn't worked out particularly well in the past, but I was flailing and desperate for any life preserver I could get my hands on. Maybe I could try again with another man, have another chance. Maybe this time if I'm good enough, if I try hard enough, if I be whatever he wants to be, he'll rescue me. Maybe I can finally be free of myself, and maybe he will be the one to free me. I latch onto this idea of him and what he can do for me, and I don't let go. William hangs out on my periphery. I lavish my attention on him. He allows me to do things for him. I use all of my worn-out wiles. I do everything I can think to do to keep him around. I agree to whatever he wants. Whatever our relationship looks like to him, that's fine with me. On August 12, 2016, in a blackout drunk in my adobe home in New Mexico, I walked blindly out of my bedroom and missed the step. I stumbled, both literally and metaphorically, and fell hard onto the pitching brick floor. The fall is my only memory of that night. The sickening sense of a loss of all control. The rolling, queasy, crumbling crash. And there in the dark corner of that dark hallway, surprising me with their presence, I see the four who are one. They're right there, standing together, all golden and white and buzzing, leaning in towards me. I can see them and I can feel them. As I fall, time slows down. As I fall, they shower me with overwhelming love and concern and care. I hear the bones snap, the nauseating thud as I crumple heavily onto the floor. They cradle my body and hold me with total urgent compassion. It was this, they say, or something worse. I woke up the next morning to find that I'd broken my right ankle and badly sprained my left, and then proceeded to walk around on them all night, numb and unconscious from the booze. By the time I made it to urgent care, my ankle was far too swollen to cast. They put a brace around my calf and wrapped it all in an ace bandage and gave me some crutches, and sent me home where I threw up before crawling into bed without even the energy to sob myself to sleep. That was the first time I broke my right ankle. It was the last time I drank, and it likely saved my life. It was a huge gift. With a broken ankle and without the escape of alcohol, I was tethered to myself. I hated it, and I needed it. I couldn't get away from me. I was still in the shadow land, but now with a rusty metal cuff around my ankle connected to a chain buried in a stone wall. The cuff dug in, scraped skin. The blood never had time to dry and crust because I wouldn't stop pulling, trying to run. My wound stayed fresh and raw and angry. I couldn't get away, but I wasn't yet willing to turn towards myself. Instead, I focused all of my rage and pain and victimhood and shame and entitlement and terror-filled need to be rescued onto William. I projected onto him, too, all of the forgiveness and allowance and acceptance that I desperately needed to give myself. And when he didn't extend me the same boundaryless mercy, I raged at him again, entitled and furious. And then I decided it was all my fault anyway, and forgave him. Not surprisingly, I do not find the safety or rescue I so desperately need. Instead, I am suspended in an irreconcilable longing. I am caught in my own unrelenting need, and I sizzle there, grasping for an unknown surrender into some unknown something that I didn't even have a word for. I smoldered and writhed in my first gift, my needful rescue me plea. The truth was that I was far past rescue. There was no surfacing. There was no salvaging. There was no getting out of what was playing out in my life. I was far too gone, too fully in the darkness, and there was no turning back. I had crossed the river Styx, descended into my own private abyss, gone where none could follow. I could not be rescued by someone else, but I didn't know that. I was alone, and I had to see this through. I would either die or save myself. There were even odds on the outcome. For more information, or to book a one-on-one session with me, visit honeyheart.org.